And I saw records made, music literally written in wax.
Amidst all of the Spotify, Apple Music, and SoundClouds of the modern age, there is a quiet trend towards one of the oldest audio technologies.
The first step, I learned, is to pour a thin layer of molten wax.
The position of the LP is not perfectly 90 degrees to the scope.
The perfect wax is put on the turntable. A cutting point called a stylus is adjusted.
You can actually learn things from records. Now, when you take the record out of the jacket, what do you got? You got advertising on both sides. It's just covered with advertising, more records on Atlantic Records they want you to buy.
The stylus, in turn, cuts the vibrations in the soft wax, records the poetic tones forever.
As the music industry went digital, the turntable seemed destined for the scrap heap. But this analog technology defied predictions and survived.
And I see a record made.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cynthia, the Audio Belle. Today, I will be telling you guys a little bit about the Pro-Ject E1 Phono turntable, which I had the opportunity to recently review. Actually, this is on Pro-Ject's affordable line of turntables. They have 4 different E-series turntables that fit along this product line. The E1 Phono is the one that I reviewed, and it has a built-in phono preamp and the ability to switch between line output or phono output, where if you want to go straight to a preamp, you could use the line output, or if you'd like to output to a separate phono preamp, you can do that via the phono output option. They also have an E1 that does not include the phono preamp and an E1 with Bluetooth, which allows you to use Bluetooth with your turntable, and it also has the built-in phono preamp as well, available for you to use if you would like. And then they have an E1 jukebox, which is kind of an all-in-one, where it has the built-in phono preamp, the ability to connect line outputs instead. You can connect directly to your speakers because it has a built-in receiver, and it has the Bluetooth option as well. The one that I reviewed is the E1 Phono, and again, that has the built-in phono preamp and none of the other bells and whistles. That one costs around $400. The regular E1 is priced at $349. The Bluetooth model is actually priced at $499, so $500. And then the one that includes everything out of the box is $799. So the E1 Phono comes with a plastic platter and a plastic dust cover. Now, from what I've heard other reviewers talking about, as well as on some forums, is that the plastic platter actually can help with resonance, whereas some of the other turntables out there in the same price range may have a cheaper type metal platter, which some are saying could cause resonance. I can't confirm or deny those claims, just something that I've read about and heard. It could be true. It does come in 3 different color options, so you can choose black, you can choose white, or walnut. I think the walnut is very gorgeous. The black is what I ended up reviewing, and while it's really pretty, I think that glossiness does attract, fingerprints and stuff a lot, dust. I live in Oklahoma, so I have problems with dust a lot in my house, and I also have 4 dogs, so they're constantly going in and out. And if you live in a situation like that, you'd probably be best going for something other than the black finish. So pretty much everything about the E1 Phono comes from factory stock, where you don't actually have to set it up yourself, which is kind of nice. So they'll pre-mount an Ortofon OM5E moving magnet cartridge for you. They've got it pre-aligned and everything set up with vertical tracking force correctly and all of that jazz. The vertical tracking force for this particular cartridge is recommended to be between 1.75 grams and 2.0 grams. I did have to do a turntable setup to account for potential previous reviewers, because it did seem like the review turntable that I got had been reviewed previously, because the vertical tracking was set a little bit high. It was at 2 point something. I'll have to go back and look. I took some pictures. I ended up using the counterweights that are included on the aluminum tone arm the turntable comes with to adjust for that VTF, or vertical tracking force, and kind of lower that. I ended up getting a digital scale to kind of get this more precise. I did find that I had a little bit of a problem getting it as precise as I wanted to. Now, some turntables will allow you to get it super precise, whereas others will be a little bit less precise, just depending on what turntable you go for. In this case, the counterweight was a little bit difficult to kind of dial in, and I couldn't get it at exactly 1.75 or exactly this. It ended up somewhere between 1.8 and 1.9 grams, and the last time I measured it, it was actually at 1.92 grams, so a little bit under 2. The reason I noticed I had to do this was actually because on first use, I was hearing some sort of a tapping noise coming from something the cartridge was picking up, and I wasn't sure what it was. I noticed something similar if I just barely tapped the little lever that you move the cartridge around with, move the whole tone arm around with. It was just this really annoying tapping sound, but when I lowered the VTF, that seemed to fix the problem because I did not hear it again. A couple other issues I ran into, I did have a grounding loop, so I ended up having to make a grounding wire and connect it up to my phono preamp, and that was only when using an external phono preamp. I didn't have this problem when using the line output option. So if you're not using an external phono preamp, that's not something you really should have to worry about. And really, they recommend, any turntable company typically will recommend using a grounding wire when you're using an external phono preamp like that. So it's not something that I can really nitpick on. I will say that with my VPI Prime turntable, which is a lot more pricey, I have not had to use a grounding wire. And there's been other turntables that I've had that I just haven't had to use one because I've never actually experienced a grounding loop with said turntables. So it does have a built-in motor, which, depending on how you look at it, can be a good thing or a bad thing. Most people say that they would prefer not to have a built-in motor when you're kind of going into that audiophile realm of turntables because it can introduce additional vibrations. But that wasn't something I really noticed with this turntable. Just something you might take into account if that's something that perhaps bothers you or you might want to dig into some more, but I didn't have any problems with it with this turntable. As I mentioned, Pro-Ject sets everything up for you from factory. If you get one of these turntables, they will pre-mount the cartridge for you. They will make sure it's aligned correctly. They'll set the vertical tracking force, or VTF. They'll set the vertical tracking angle, or VTA. Pretty much everything you would have to worry about in a more high-end turntable setup, they set for you. Something else that you'd have to account for would be azimuth. As far as some of these configurations go, that is something that you will not have the ability to do with this turntable, being as WYSIWYG as it is, or what you see is what you get. So you won't be able to set azimuth or VTA with this turntable. There's no anti-skate feature that you're able to use. So just about the only thing you can really set is the VTF, and you can check the cart alignment and make sure that it is level. You could check the tone arm alignment and see if it's level, or some people prefer a bump in the back or a bump in the front. When I got the turntable, as I said, the VTF was set a little bit too high and it was causing this weird sound. I ended up setting it per spec, and after doing so, that issue resolved. It did introduce something else that was kind of interesting. There's a little tone arm clip that should hold your tone arm in and make sure that it's safe and secure. Oftentimes you'll hear turntable manufacturers recommend that you tie up your tone arm with a twisty tie if you're ever having to move it or anything like that, just to make sure that nothing happens and that tone arm doesn't swing around and potentially get damaged, or you don't want your cartridge accidentally bumping into the platter and damaging the stylus and then having to go for a replacement part there. In this case, they have a tone arm clip, but it's like a hook shape. While that seemed to work properly at first, once I lowered the VTF, the tone arm kind of raises a little bit more towards the front, more towards the cartridge. It doesn't want to fit in that hook quite as well. I have to kind of force fit it in there, and I don't mean like use a lot of force, but I have to actually put it in there, make sure it stays, and gently close the lid. Because from what I've seen, if I barely just tap the tone arm, it will swing right out of that clip. Or if I close the lid just with a normal amount of force, it also swings out. So if you get this turntable and you notice that, definitely be careful. It could have just been something with my specific clip. I don't know. I do think there might be some opportunity for them to potentially add another piece of plastic to fully enclose that tone arm. My VPI Prime has a clip that allows you to fully enclose that tone arm and completely lock it in. I don't think it would be too bad to add something like that to maybe make it a little bit less likely to kind of swing about when you have to move the turntable or shut the lid or something, because it seems kind of delicate. Only other things that I would say that I was a little bit iffy on was I was kind of confused going on their website because I was trying to figure out, well, if this is Pro-Ject's entry-level, affordable, kind of, getting into the audiophile world turntable, then what's the next step up, or, what's the next step down from there? And what would we be upgrading to and from? And I did notice that there were several turntables on their website that were also priced at around the same price point. So I was kind of confused on, well, why would you pay $300 to $500 for this turntable with, this set of features, whereas you could get this turntable with this set of features? But I suppose it's just because, there's some different aesthetics. There's, I guess, depending on what exactly you're looking for, what do you want it to look like, or what features do you want it to offer? Well, you can still get an affordable turntable with this set of features if that's what you prefer, or that set of features if that's what you prefer. Specifically, the Jukebox E1 having like an all-in-one system in it is actually not too bad of a deal if you're coming from something like a Crossley all-in-one and you want another all-in-one that is kind of stepping into the entry-level audiophile game. That might be something for you. I can't attest to what the receiver's like or anything like that though, because I haven't tested that model. The models that include Bluetooth, from what I read online from like Amazon reviews and stuff, was that a lot of people seem to have some issues with the Bluetooth functionality working. It could have been resolved since then, or maybe something that they were doing wrong. I'm not sure. I didn't have enough time to dig into that, and again, didn't get to try out those models. But if you're looking at the Bluetooth models, definitely might do some more research on it to see what kind of problems people were having with it, and if it's something that's easily resolved. So as far as the dust cover goes, you're not glued to this plastic dust cover if you don't like it. It is to protect from dust, but some people don't actually like to use dust covers at all. Some people hear additional resonance with it either on or off, as far as like up or down. If you completely take it off of its hinges and remove it, that's fine, you can do that. And you can see if you hear any additional resonance with it on versus, it off. You could also upgrade it. You could upgrade it to an acrylic dust cover. I know some people like to do that. I ended up getting an acrylic dust cover made by a company that's local to me for my VPI. Pro-Ject might offer an acrylic dust cover. I haven't checked that. So on the bottom of the turntable, there are 3 feet. There are 2 in the front and 1 in the center of the back of the turntable. And they have this sort of rubber type material, which whenever you see that on feet on audio gear is meant to help absorb vibrations. I didn't really have too much of an issue with vibrations with this turntable. Again, it seemed pretty clean as far as that goes. I would say that it's a very light turntable, and with only 3 feet, it seemed a little bit unsturdy. So if you do get this product, be careful not to like knock it over or rock it by accident when you're putting a record on or taking one off. It is a little bit delicate, but it is a really nice product. All right, so for the subjective listening experience, I want to tell you guys about the passion that drove me to want to review this turntable. because it's a $400 turntable, and I have a turntable with a cartridge that is a total of around $6,200. So I kind of had to reset my expectations to review the Pro-Ject turntable because I've been spoiled with such great sound. And that's not to say that a $400 turntable can't have great sound, because this one absolutely did. It's just to say that when you put all of that money into a piece of audiophile gear, well, you're putting money towards something, either improvement of the platter, improvement of a belt, of the motor being externalized, which this one has an external motor, improvement in, what type of cartridge you have, or the construct of the tone arm. How long is the tone arm? How short is the tone arm? Can you make adjustments, or can you not make adjustments? That being said, I was really actually excited to review a $400 turntable because my passion with vinyl got started in my teenage years. And actually, my passion for music in general got started in my childhood. I had a very close relationship with my mom and my dad, and when I was a little girl, I still remember us being on road trips listening to music in the car. We get CDs at the gas station, and my parents were a decade older than that of my peers, so the music I would listen to would be classic rock or pop or Motown from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I still remember listening to Al Stewart in the car, Bob Seger, Merle Haggard, Rod Stewart, and memorizing all of the songs. Like, I had On the Border from Al Stewart's Year of the Cat album memorized to a T when I was a kid. And then as I got into those teenage years of, boyfriends and heartbreak, and started to get even closer to my mom, she set me up with a hippie design room and got me a turntable from a thrift store, and gave me one of her Temptations albums and let me just listen to music in my room. And I just started really getting into listening to vinyl, and I became a music lover. And then at 20 years old, my mom passed away. And so I had all of these records from her record collection, and I just wanted to keep myself busy to kind of, get through the process of mourning and whatnot. So I was constantly cleaning my house. It was my first time on my own. And we had this record player from the thrift store that I was telling you guys about. And so I put on every single record of hers and just listened to them all as I was constantly cleaning my house every day. And every new record that I put on, a lot of them were actually pretty scratched up. I could tell which ones she liked the most. But every record that I put on that I either hadn't heard before or that I had some sort of nostalgic connection to just was like a treasure hunt for me. I was finding treasure and playing it on this record player until I started actually going to vintage record stores to seek out records on my own. And then I started trying to find, better copies of records she may have scratched up to the point of no return where there's a skip, which now I realize on a better piece of equipment is a no-no to play a really bad record, or else you could damage your stylus. You don't want to do that.
Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks, and now back to the show.
So fast forward to today, I can't listen to something if it's scratched to really any degree. I've got an airtight PC7 moving coil, low output moving coil cartridge, and it picks up every single detail. So I was really excited to get to listen to the Pro-Ject because I was like, I don't have to be a super critic with this product. Absolutely, I do critique this turntable, and I will get to that. But I was like, I can enjoy music again. I can just go and listen to some music that is kind of a blast from the past, maybe some classic rock or something, and actually, have that passion again. Now I get to actually listen to something that brings me back to where I started. And actually, my first thoughts when I put on a record, which was Rubber Soul from the Beatles, was color me impressed that this turntable for $400 is really good. So I listened to a few different records with this turntable. I listened to Alan Parsons' project, Turn of a Friendly Card, Alan Parsons' project, Tales of Mystery and Imagination, and then a 45 RPM copy of Alan Parsons' project, iRobot. And this particular copy of iRobot was on 180 gram vinyl. At first, I did notice that it had some issues playing the thicker vinyl, but I think that was before I noticed the issue with the VTF as well as the grounding loop. There was some distortion. I don't think I noticed that again because I didn't have it happen after fixing those two things. So my first experience with the turntable was I paired it with a Pro-Ject DS tube box, and the tube box has 2 tubes in it. It's a pretty good little phono preamp, and it has jumpers on the back where you can set specs for if it's a moving magnet or a particular type of moving coil or whatever the cartridge calls for. In this case, it was just regular moving magnet specs. So after kind of getting through some of the nostalgic albums and really just enjoying the music, I started getting into the more critic mindset so that I can give you guys a well-rounded review. What I noticed was the turntable and cartridge pairing was really bassy. There were just tones that were overly bassy. If I played a Lindsey Stirling album, which already the bass is pretty bumped up on her music. She does a violin, dubstep, rock kind of combo. And I recently went to a Lindsey Stirling concert last summer, which I talk about in my review of the Shit Freya Plus. At the Absolute Sound and HiFi Plus, we are to compare our reviews with the Absolute Sound and not like a gear-to-gear review. I do listen to other gear and then compare, 2 pieces of gear to the Absolute Sound and to live sound and whether it actually sounds like, are you at the concert or are you at the orchestra? Is that guitar in the room? Is it imaging correctly? And so those are the types of things that I look for. I look for sonic qualities, characteristics of whether that sound represents what I heard when I went to the concert or to the orchestra hall. So for Lindsey Stirling, it didn't really sound like it sounded at her concert. However, the concert, it was way too bassy compared to her recordings. And when I listened to the recordings on the Pro-Ject, it was even more so. So a lot of the times the bass in the music was overpowering the violin. But the violin sounded absolutely beautiful, transparent. The highs were really clear, and just overall, I really liked the highs that the Audiophon cartridge presented. I just thought that something is causing the bass to be too loud. And I did take into account resonance, and I tried different things to make sure that it wasn't the turntable picking up stuff from the speakers that it shouldn't be picking up, but it wasn't the case. So I'm not sure why, because I've seen people say that this particular cartridge is a pretty neutral cartridge. I do think that it could be corrected for with EQ. The bass was muddy at times, actually a lot of the time, but there were times where the slam effect was really powerful and tight. So it depended from recording to recording and what all was going on. Most of the time I was unimpressed with the bass, but really impressed with the mid to high frequencies that were being reproduced through the speakers. So is this a good upgrade from, a cheaper turntable? Well, I actually had a cheaper turntable that I was able to kind of do a little bit of ABA comparisons to, and that was the Audio-Technica AT-LP60. It's a $99 turntable. So going from a $99 turntable, perhaps upgrading to a $400 turntable, is it worth it? I switched in the Audio-Technica, and I'm still using the Pro-Ject 2 box. And at first I thought it sounded really similar, just that the Audio-Technica was less bassy, but the highs on the Audio-Technica were not as great, and I noticed that they were not as transparent as the Pro-Ject. And also this Audio-Technica has an automatic tone arm. It's kind of locked in where you have to start the turntable and let the tone arm move over to the record, and then if you want to move the tone arm from there, you can. Stepping up to the Pro-Ject, you kind of get started into that world of audiophile turntables where you get to make more adjustments. You get to move the turntable on your own. You have an actuating lever, which the Audio-Technica has, but it's a button instead of a lever. You have, some nicer components in the turntable and just an overall better cartridge, in my opinion, than what was on the Audio-Technica. I also listened to both turntables without the external phono preamp. I used their line outputs. I noticed some pretty big differences with the Audio-Technica's line output versus its phono. The line output I didn't really care for. It was even less transparent using line outputs and using its internal phono preamp. When I switched back over to the Pro-Ject E1 phono, I noticed a huge difference if you were to upgrade from a $99 turntable to a $400 turntable. Huge difference in transparency, even though it was bassier and I didn't really care for that. That might be something that you'd like. I just think that if you're into really tight quality bass, you're gonna have to do some EQing, but that it does have the potential to sound the way you want it to sound because that bass is there. Or if you have smaller speakers or a smaller room and not huge speakers like I have, it may not even be an issue for you. Now, comparing the Pro-Ject's line output, so its internal phono preamp, the built-in one, to the Pro-Ject two-box DS that I connected externally, the tubes definitely make the sound more well-rounded. Everything is more well-rounded. The bass doesn't sound quite as muddy. It sounds more well-rounded on the highs, and just, I guess overall, it sounds smoother. The built-in phono preamp is not bad at all. In fact, I would put it up against the external phono preamp. I would say that the external phono preamp, while it was better, it was different in just really minute ways. Things that just account for the overall smoothness. The built-in phono preamp, I had to turn up the volume because, of course, tubes add gain. Using the external tube phono preamp, it was already turned up to the level I wanted it to be at. And when I went to their built-in phono preamp, I had to turn it up to account for the loss of gain from the tubes. But otherwise, sonically, it wasn't too different. Just again, the smoothing of the tubes was really all that I heard difference-wise. So how does it compare to the absolute sound? Well, I kind of already gave you guys a glimpse into that. The Lindsey Stirling concert, I would say not so much. Songs with electric guitar. There was this album that a couple of friends of mine showed me by John Frusciante. He was the guitar player of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The sound, when they brought it over and we listened on my VPI, sounded like you were in a club listening to him play the guitar. And it was amazing. It sounded bluesy and just smooth and fluent. And when I played it on the Pro-Ject, I had a very similar experience. I will say that the guitar sounded real, but it wasn't quite up to par with as real as it sounded on the VPI. But I think it was a step in the right direction as far as sounding close to a live electric guitar. And a lot of the music that I played that included electric guitars really sounded good on this turntable. For whatever reason, an electric guitar absolutely just shone with this turntable. And it sounded like there was an electric guitar in the room with you, just playing to you and serenading you, and it was beautiful. In other songs, it was rocking. I really got into the music. I would say for maybe acoustical music and things like that, this is where this cartridge probably really shines. I think stuff that's overly bassy, again, you're going to have to make tweaks in your system in order to properly introduce certain albums onto this turntable. Things like new age, EDM, modern tracks that are more bassy. So the next question, and something that I've learned is very important, is how accurately does a specific piece of gear reproduce a live orchestra. You may not listen to orchestral music. I don't know. You may love orchestral music. It doesn't matter, because when you're reviewing a product, if you can listen to an orchestra live, like go to a concert and then come back and try to reproduce that orchestra, whatever piece it was, on your equipment, and it sounds like you were there, it sounds like what it sounded like when you went to Orchestra Hall, then that's really saying something. Because if you have an orchestra with, anywhere upwards of 60 to 80 musicians playing different instruments at once, for a piece to be able to reproduce that is very challenging, especially with speaker designers. The big hurdle of reproducing music is being able to reproduce multiple different instruments and musicians at a time. It's pretty easy to reproduce 1 or 2 stringed instruments and a female vocalist, but very challenging to reproduce a full orchestra. I wanted to see if this turntable could accurately reproduce that. To my surprise, it actually did. It came pretty close for the price point. It was pretty decent. I listened to Pathétique by Tchaikovsky. Movements 3 and 4, specifically, those are the movements I like. The only issues I really encountered was that the violins were really in my face, and that's not what I experienced when I went to Orchestra Hall. They were too much in my face. The stand-up bass was too loud, and overall the bass qualities of the orchestra were over-exemplified. When you go to an orchestra, it's actually not super bassy. Even when they, play the timpani or the bass drum, those are things that, while the bass drum can go super low and the timpani can't, but you get some sort of a slam effect from it, that they're not going to be very loud. So bass at an orchestra inherently is not very loud. This was too loud, so I knew that, yeah, the bass is a little bit high. Again, this is something that you can bring down with EQ, and something that you could probably tailor to fit your needs. Or if you like it, then it's already there. Otherwise, the imaging of the orchestra was pretty good. There was some depth to it that I could hear, and that's something that I more so would have expected going to an orchestra. You can hear a little bit of depth because some instruments are obviously more towards the rear of the stage and some are more towards the front. I like to include some objective points, such as measurements or different things. And specifically, since this is a turntable review, I wanted to show you guys the laser leveling of the cartridge as well as the tone arm. The vertical tracking force measurements I took. I want to show you kind of a microscopic view of the stylus. I used a USB microscope. Now, from what I've heard, a USB microscope is probably not good enough, but it can get you a little bit of a view in at the stylus. However, if you want to see like stylus wear and whatnot, you may need something stronger, which a lot of people don't have expertise in, so it may not be worth it. You could just listen for distortion and different things to tell if you have stylus wear and might need to replace it. I did do an RPM check with my phone because the Audio-Technica sounded way faster than the Pro-Ject, and so I was curious what, each turntable was measuring, and surprisingly, neither one of them measured correctly. The Audio-Technica was running too fast, so it was not in the range of green per my RPM app on my phone. And the Pro-Ject was actually a little bit slow. So I am curious about that, and if anybody else has experienced that, if they own a Pro-Ject turntable or, one of these lines of Pro-Ject turntables. It sounded better with it being slower than faster though, and you couldn't tell too much of a difference unless you were comparing to the Audio-Technica, in my opinion, because it was just so much faster. So it didn't seem like it would make too much of a difference, but just something to take, into consideration. It wasn't running exactly per spec. The phone apps won't be 100% accurate, but they can give you at least a good idea, and they should be in range, and it should work fine. The phone app does work fine with my VPI, and I can tell that it's in range. If you are a hardcore audiophile, this product is not for you. If you're someone who wants to get a taste of what an audiophile turntable can sound like, this will get you in the door. And if you are a hardcore music lover that wants to be able to play your vinyl records, then this product is definitely for you. I do feel like if you are into really bassy tracks though, and depending on the quality of bass that you like, if you like something a little tighter and snappier on the low end, then you may be going for some sort of EQ. I think this turntable does have the potential to EQ to whatever type of setting you want it to be at, as far as, you know, getting that bass to be tighter and not as muffled as what I heard it to be. But I do feel that this turntable cart combo has the potential to get whatever type of bass you want with the addition of some good EQ. You might end up upgrading the cartridge. From what my turntable dealer told me, the potential to upgrade the cartridge on this particular turntable's price range, you might go somewhere in the 500 to 600 range at a maximum for a different cartridge. But at that point, probably, you know, you might just be better upgrading the turntable and cart combo again rather than buying a cartridge that's the same price as your turntable. Just depending. If you really like the turntable and you just want a better cartridge and you have the money, then why not? If you're upgrading from a Crossley all-in-one, a low-tier Audio-Technica, or a lower-tier Pro-Ject turntable, then I don't think you will be disappointed, and I think that the Pro-Ject E1 Phono will satisfy all your needs. This is Cynthia, the Audio Belle, signing out.